Last week, I posted a video detailing DICE and EA's decision to lengthen the TTK of Battlefield 5. This basically results in you having to hit more shots on enemies to take them down, and it changes the game considerably as a result. This change was met with huge backlash at the time, with lots of current players standing up against the change, feeding back that the change was not something they wanted to happen. If you want to get yourself up to date, you can go and watch my video from last week. There's a link down in the description for you. But just before the weekend, DICE and EA posted an update on the situation, and here's what they said. Hi Battlefield community. On behalf of the Battlefield team, I'd like to apologise for the silence over the past couple of days on the TTK topic. We've seen it's been a big talking point and causing a divide in the community, which was never our intention. We have been listening closely to what you've all been saying. Changes to the game carrying this kind of weight needs clearer, earlier communication before getting rolled out. We will improve how we roll out updates in the future and respond more quickly when you have questions or concerns. So why change TTK now? The intent came from us observing that new players are having a very hard time with the game compared to our core players, and we wanted to see if we could improve this over the holidays so more players can have a great time. As many of our veteran players know, Battlefield games constantly evolve and change over time in our collaboration with the community. Battlefield 5 is no exception. We heard your feedback that many of you prefer the old TTK values, with only one playlist featuring Conquest using the core settings clearly not being enough. To fix that, we will be adding a core version of all playlists in the game next week, giving you a clearer choice between new and old settings. We'll update you early next week on when the new playlist will be added. We want to hear from you about the changes we're making. We'd also like to thank you all for the constructive discussions and feedback we're seeing. Thank you. Now, I know that everybody has their opinions on what DICE and EA is doing at the moment, so whatever that opinion is, feel free to leave it down in the comments section, and the more people that express their opinion, the more feedback DICE and EA gets on this entire scenario, regardless of where you sit. But here is what I think about this update. Honestly, I think it's a terrible idea, and it continues the extremely poor handling of what has now become a game-wide crisis, including more playlists despite the fact the community was up in arms at the first playlist being introduced, makes it look like DICE and EA haven't listened to the feedback they were getting at all. I've got a few points to discuss, so let's get into that now. Firstly, this updated decision from DICE and EA now shows who they're trying to target with Battlefield 5 more clearly than has been said in the past. It's the new passive players. The statement directly says, we wanted to see if we can improve this over the holidays. Every game released in the later half of a year usually benefits from a surge of new players due to sales over the Christmas period, and despite all the criticism that Battlefield 5 has already gotten, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see more of these new players enter the game over the next few weeks. The TTK is being lengthened for those players so they can have a better experience, and I think DICE and EA's hope here is that those players will end up liking what they play and they'll stick around for longer than just the holiday period. This would then create a bigger player base overall for the game and potentially increase sales of cosmetic microtransactions when that real-life money currency is activated within the game. It might also increase exposure of the game to other players who haven't picked it up yet if they see their friends playing it or if their friends start talking to them about playing the game. Personally, I don't think this tactic is going to work as intended and keep those newer players invested long term. In doing what they've already done, DICE and EA haven't successfully created an experience that's better for all players. This is something they said they wanted to do in their very first post on Reddit about lengthening the TTK. What they've actually managed to do is alienate their core player base, the players already playing and enjoying Battlefield 5. These are the players who brought the game at launch, maybe even pre-ordered the game, and who were enjoying the TTK as it was when it released. The TTK was more challenging at launch, and this was something the community that stuck with the game since reveal really liked, and said it was a great feature of Battlefield 5. Through the closed alphas and the open beta, we saw DICE tweak the settings and balance into a position so that at launch, we had a gunplay system that rewarded flanking and surprise attacks on enemy players, and appeared to effectively balance high and low rate of fire weapons. There was still some balancing that was needed for sure, but in general, the gunplay was in a very good position. Lots of previous players of the franchise were actively returning to Battlefield 5 because the gunplay was something they enjoyed and appreciated after Battlefield 1, which didn't suit them. I've also seen a lot of competitive esports players who praised the gunplay system that DICE had created as well, which was actually really exciting to see. Lots of first-person shooter games also have active present esports scenes, and early signs were that players seemed to like what had been released. Now, however, that experience has gone, and it's been replaced with a blanket weapon damage decrease that takes the game back towards the Battlefield 1 style of gunplay. The thing is, as I've just explained, the majority didn't want this to happen, and they much preferred things the way they were. The game we were sold on November 20th when it launched was the game we were looking forward to, and that's despite all the past controversies that Battlefield 5 has already had. Now, we're playing a totally different game, one that feels spongy and reminds me of the game that I played through 2016, 2017 and early 2018. That game was Battlefield 1. And there are so many other issues currently present in Battlefield 5 that I find it extremely hard to believe or even accept that new passive players are not returning to the game purely because they're dying too fast. I mean, last week, DICE devs were doing public netcode tests, which I took part in, by the way, to gather data around whether the time to death, or TTD, had issues, and to see if players were receiving damage correctly or not. DICE knows there are bugs here that cause one-frame deaths, or just cause extremely fast deaths, with no prior notification of damage. A TTK increase isn't going to change that. If a game has bugs that loads damage into one update and deals it all in one big lump, that's still going to be present if you change a different part of the game. A TTK increase merely makes the experience even more frustrating for players on the receiving end of one-frame deaths, because they are still happening because they haven't been fixed, and for the player shooting because it now takes longer to kill players than it did before, and situations where you would have killed somebody before now no longer occur. Not only TTD and netcode bugs though, we've got issues with bipod performance, Tides of War assignments not working so you can't unlock new items, the game not rewarding you with company coins after each round if you're at rank 50, so you can't progress your weapon specializations, or purchase cosmetic items, extremely long quitting times to get back to the main menu, V1 and JB2 rocket deployment issues, where half your screen goes black and you can't deploy anything, not being able to change assignments in-game so you have to quit, and experience the long quitting times, getting stuck on small objects on the ground, being unable to vault through windows or overcover properly, proning and the game randomly standing you back up again, and so much more besides. Surely new players joining the game now over the holidays are going to see these problems as well. They're so obvious, and they interfere with the core workings of the game. The company coin issue directly affects the progression system, which is one of the fundamental parts of a first-person shooter. DICE and EA have said that the next major update for Battlefield 5 isn't coming until January, so these bugs we're already dealing with will likely still be in the game until after the point that the team wants to make the game more enjoyable for new players. If these issues are annoying for veteran players, which they are for me, and veteran players are more likely to put up with them, what are new players going to do when they experience them? I'd argue they're going to put the game down, not play it, and I don't think they're going to come back, which is the same problem they've got right now. I feel DICE and EA would be better serving their current and potential future players if they spent time fixing already outstanding bugs in the game, rather than messing with a feature that players liked the way it was. Something else I'd like to touch on is just the simple confusion or anger a system like this is going to cause in matches, having two separate TTK values within the same multiplayer experience. With there being no overall consistency to the gunplay, and now a lack of proper balance because of the blanket damage reduction being applied without any clear thought to specific weapons, anger is going to rise. It's going to be really confusing and jarring for any player of the game if their guns do different damage in different servers, depending on what playlist they pick. Sometimes you do less damage per shot, sometimes you do more. What other first-person shooter out there right now does this in their live multiplayer service? What other games use the standard game client, the one that you paid money to access, to conduct community-wide tests after the game has moved out of its open beta state? I can't think of any other game that does that, and considering EA and DICE are huge players within the video game industry, you'd perhaps expect them to act with more caution and knowledge based on their past experiences. Previous games have used a totally separate client to test things. Why can't you do that here with Battlefield 5? Having two separate TTK values live at the same time makes it look like DICE and EA have no idea who they really want to target with this game, despite having previously focused on core players loyal to the franchise. That lack of direction makes it look like they're trying to please everybody, and in most scenarios I think we all know trying to please everybody just isn't possible. Next, let's talk about the playlist being introduced. Feedback from the first TTK update last week was that players who liked the previous TTK didn't appreciate being sectioned or segregated from the rest of the community simply because they liked something different to what was being offered on all other servers in the game. DICE and EA's solution is to simply introduce more playlists into the game that support the old TTK, splitting the community even further. This is an absolutely awful idea, and when I read the Reddit post stating this was what was going to happen, I openly laughed at it. I honestly cannot believe how anyone involved in trying to clean up this mess thought this might be a good idea. DICE and EA got plenty of feedback last week when the first TTK change was introduced. In their second update, they appear to have completely ignored all of that feedback and instead have chosen to continue the split of their own community. Splitting the community is something we were supposed to be moving away from with the removal of the premium season pass model, but it appears DICE and EA have totally forgotten about that in their haste to try and appease passive casual players. Going further than that though, and this is a screenshot that I've taken from Jack's video on the subject, he made a really good point here. This is how these new playlists could look in the game when they're introduced. How confusing is that going to be for new players that DICE is trying to appeal to? How are they going to know with a quick glance which version of Conquest, which version of Frontlines, Grand Operations, whatever, which version should they be playing? There's too many options on that screen. Not only that, but it looks really messy to me. You've also got to question how DICE and EA are planning to message these lost passive players that the game is being changed for them. New passive players getting into the game over the holidays, they're not going to know any different. But players being sought, those who died too fast and then quit the game and didn't log back in, how are DICE and EA going to let those players know that their experience might potentially be different now? I honestly couldn't tell you. This change is targeted at a bunch of players who may never even return to the game anyway, at the expense of the core player base who are still playing the game. You've angered the core player base by changing something that most of them would argue didn't need changing, and now you're trying to appeal to a completely different type of player. A type of player this game wasn't even built for. The players you're annoying are the dedicated fans who've looked past issues and they continue to log in every single day. If you fail those players in favour of trying to appease passive players who've already dropped the game, or new players who haven't even bought into the game yet, you will not have a core community left. Eventually, and I can see this within the core community already, dedicated fans will have had enough, and they will leave the game and they'll find something else to play. The game they were sold is being fundamentally changed, and they don't like the experience anymore. Slowly, one by one, that core could be reduced in size, and then you won't have a dedicated section of the community to support your game anymore. There's been virtually no consultation of the community with this change, and the lack of warning as well has really upset some people. The core community has been playing this game for a month, and now they're having all of that practice and all of that training with the gunplay seem much less important because EA and DICE want to appeal to different players so they buy the game. How fair does that sound? It looks like publicly that EA and DICE don't care about keeping their core Battlefield fans happy and would rather try and sell some more copies of their game. This update and decision DICE and EA have taken, in my opinion, is not going to work. It's one that continues to aggravate the core community, which means they'll continue to make negative noise about the game in public forums. In trying to attract new players, they're going to see that noise, and they're going to question what's currently happening when they read into things. And once they find out that the team behind the game isn't listening to the people who love the game as it currently is, I can almost guarantee those players will decide not to buy in. I feel like DICE and EA have really lost sight of the long-term future of this game, and they're trying a quick fix, as it were, to get more people to join. I don't think it's any secret either that the game has undersold on its expectations, and the issue the game is facing right now is not even the reason for that. Battlefield 5 has already had its fair share of public controversies that likely stimulated a lot of those passive players to not buy the game anyway. By providing a quick fix, DICE and EA are setting themselves up to lose more of their dedicated players who looked through those issues and controversies, and to fail at gaining the attention of the passive players they appear to be trying to win over. Long-term vision is what is needed here to bring Battlefield 5 out of the red and put it into the black. By providing a challenging experience with the gunplay, DICE and EA will let players know that the more they practice with this game, the better they're going to get. Over time, word of mouth spreads and more players pick up the game because they've heard it's a great experience. And over time, more players will be more likely to open their wallets and put cash down for cosmetic microtransactions. That makes their experience different to others, and it helps fund the development of this game. We've got to remember, no premium pass, no guaranteed revenue. DICE need to sell cosmetic microtransactions to make this game a success. That, in turn, creates a strong core audience. If they're going to pay more money for cosmetic microtransactions, you can be pretty sure they care about the product and the experience enough. DICE and EA have got tunnel vision. They're focusing too much on short-term issues that will be rectified with time and are compromising the long-term prosperity of Battlefield 5. At the moment, in this current situation, I don't see Battlefield 5 having a strong, core, dedicated community in 12 months' time. If DICE and EA continue to ignore the voice of the core community, those players will leave. They'll have lost confidence in the team, and they'll likely find something else to play. Already, players since launch are leaving because they don't like the TTK changes, and they don't like that they're being forced into playlists being separated. By trying to appeal to new players, DICE and EA are saying they're willing to gamble the dedication, the support, and the love of the core Battlefield community that are stuck with the game for years, in exchange for new players who are far less likely to continue buying into Battlefield games as time goes on. The dedication, the support, and the fandom the core community has for Battlefield games has been built over years and years worth of games. That's not something that appears overnight with brand new players. Changing the game for the holidays is not a good move, and it's nowhere near enough time to convince those new players being sought that the game is something they should really stick with. The change doesn't fit with the design that DICE and EA went for before the launch, and the player base that were playing the game before this changed liked things the way they were. The game currently isn't as good as it can be, and I want it to be the best that it can be. My advice to EA and DICE at this point would just be to completely scrap this TTK test thing they've got going on, remove Conquest Core, and return the game back to the old TTK values before Christmas. If this test is left active over the holiday period, that's going to mean a lot of angry core players flooding public forums with negative opinions on what's happening, and as a result, those passive players are going to be less likely to want to try the game. A lot of those core players won't wait over the holidays either to get the experience back that they liked, and they're probably going to find another game to go and play. I mean, Insurgency Sandstorm just released on PC. That provides a more tactical, hardcore experience, similar to what Battlefield 5 was providing. So I do see a lot of players on PC at least jumping across to that and giving it a go. DICE and EA has lost a lot of community trust with this TTK debacle at a time where they just didn't need to, because if they'd handled it differently, there wouldn't have been this backlash. Now, all they can do is come out, own the mistake, and commit to improving the Battlefield 5 experience in other ways. There's a January patch coming up. I'm sure that's going to fix a lot of issues with the game. Start talking to players about that right now, and focus on the good improvements that you're going to be making, and start talking about the next chapter of the Tides of War, and focus the community around upcoming content. Take this conversation away entirely from TTK, because right now, anything in that area, other than a full retraction of the test, is just going to rile up the community even more. And I do say now, you're going to struggle to get some of those core players back on side. This is going to hang over EA and DICE's head for months, until they can show good intentions with future updates and content. I do think the people in control at DICE and EA need to use this experience as an example of what not to do in the future, because annoying your core player base is something that can dramatically change public perception very, very quickly around your game. So there you are, that's my opinion on the TTK debacle at the moment. I've gone on for 20 minutes, I'm going to stop taking any more of your precious time, but do leave your opinions down below in the comments section, and I'll catch you guys in another video soon.